views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Everyone, welcome to Open BxRx Remote, our special coverage from my living workspace, Chari Executive Suites, where we continue to provide you with the up-to-date information regarding COVID-19 and the impact it's having on our community. I'm Rhina Valentin, your host, Y Café con Leche, with you every Friday. Here's what's coming up in today's show. Leading things off, we'll speak to Assemblymember Nathalia Fernandez, representing the 80th District, about the $177 billion budget for the next fiscal year. We'll discuss the major cuts on Medicaid, the public school funding system, and bail reform. After that, we'll find out the benefits of Ayurveda and Yoga Therapy to help you cope during this pandemic crisis when we speak to Ayurvedic practitioner and yoga therapist Corey Touche. Then visual artist Antoinette Legnini joins the show to tell us about how she's staying creative through these challenging times with art classes she's offering to students online. Later on in the show, Bobby C brings us an up-to-date with the latest headlines in the world of sports. And lastly, we'll hear about a Songwriters Sunday, an open mic event that will provide food and supplies for people in the Bronx community through the People's Food Program. We'll speak with I Am Chelsea I Am and co-founder of Black Lives Matter Greater New York, Shavana Newsom, about their collaboration. Then we'll close with a taste of what you can expect from the event later in the show. So sit back y prepárate. All this and more is headed your way, because now we are officially open. Welcome to Open. I'm Rhina Valentin, your host, Café con Leche, for the next hour, encouraging you to get social with us online, especially during these social distancing times. We want to hear from you. Tweet us and follow us on Instagram at BronxNet TV and like us on Facebook at Open BronxNet Television. And of course, if you want to get in touch with me, you can find me on all the platforms on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn at Rhina Valentin. So although we're going through a pandemic crisis, the state legislators were forced to pass a $177 billion budget that includes changing bail reform, overhauling Medicaid, while holding education funding flat. Joining us to discuss more on this subject matter, please welcome Assemblywoman Nathalia Fernandez. Hey, Nathalia, how are you doing during these critical times?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on today. Thankful that, feeling well and during this pandemic with everyone, but yes, all is good, thank God.
Well, it's a wonderful thing that we do have technology so that we're able to continue forging forward and moving things forward. However, while New York is at a pause, the work that needs to be implemented is based on what our future looks like. So let's talk a little bit about this $177 billion budget.
Yeah, well, it's a lot of money. And it's been tough since we started. And going into Albany this year, we knew we had less money to work with than last year. So it was already known before the year started that we had a $6 billion deficit, meaning that we didn't have enough to fund what we want to fund and what, increases we knew we wanted. So before the pandemic hit, it was already tough, trying to decide where to cut, because everybody is needing a little something more to continue the work that they're doing based on, the new information that was probably discovered the year before. But it was a really, really tough budget. And from the beginning, we knew that, Medicaid cuts might be in the budget. And since day one, myself and a lot of members were adamant, we can't cut Medicaid. Like before even the pandemic hit, this is a vital, vital program that funds our hospitals, that covers our constituents, and that provides, basic health care, even though we should all be with the best healthcare, to, the most vulnerable and lower income communities. So it was, a fight that started since day one. But when the pandemic hit, it really just flipped everything upside down. The state, I do commend the governor for his action in, getting the state ready for this, with his deployment of supplies and direction for the Department of Health and everything. So I do think, it was good work there. But as we were getting to the budget, money was dwindling. Now, because of everything that was spent to start handling this pandemic, we were at a $10 billion, close to $15 billion deficit. So we knew that things were going to get cut. And unfortunately, some areas did see less money. Like, I believe our cultural institutions got a few less million. Our education funding stayed flat, which is a problem because every year, myself with legislators, we fight for more funding for education. About like maybe 20 years ago, I could be wrong on the number, but a lawsuit was put to show that certain areas in the state are not receiving the funding that they need to address the problems, in particular to the area. So New York City, a lot of inner city schools, in poor income communities, we're struggling with making sure that the schools are up to par with the needs of the community. So every year it's always a fight for another billion for education, another couple billion here and this, but unfortunately it stayed flat. So understanding again that it's because there's no money. I just felt that, for certain areas, we should have fought hard and kept the funding there and tried to increase it. Because I don't know if you guys saw my video on the floor when I explained my vote for this particular bill, because there was about 9 bills that were presented that broke down the budget. We're reinventing how our children are learning right now. Look how we're doing this interview.
Right, exactly.
Our children are learning like this. Our teachers are now probably having to do double hours trying to create the lesson plan and do it online. And
but let's not forget the teacher. Let's talk about the parents too.
The parents, yes.
Parents who are small business owners as well.
That too. And that was I don't want to say a letdown or something sad, but it was really just something that the state couldn't do. We were already tight on money. We lost more money. And then to know that there's an ask and a need for financial relief for small businesses, the state just couldn't afford it, like, at all. So sad to say that the state couldn't do so, but New York City and the federal government, thank God, after, pushing and getting that stimulus bill passed, do have relief opportunities for small businesses. So if anybody wants to check my social media, Fernandez4NY on Instagram, I do have a one-pager there that shows the links and the steps and what's available for what the federal funding's doing, giving small business loans, and what the city's doing under small business services.
And so I know you're very passionate about what you do, especially coming from the Bronx, and the history behind your commitment to the Bronx, your political background. Does being or having been the Bronx regional representative for Governor Andrew Cuomo in the past work as an advantage for your particular district?
Yes, I would say so, because I worked for him and I was in the administration. I kind of have an idea of how he thinks and how he works. So part of me was even hoping that the Medicaid cuts, would not happen, because last year we heard that there was a risk of $500 million cuts to Medicaid. So again, the members, rallied and we wrote letters and we put pressure, like, we can't do this, we can't do this. And then last minute in the budget, Governor Cuomo, because the way the budget works, the governor has to present the budget, and the bodies of the legislature, the Assembly and the Senate, have to decide yes or no what we don't like. So we can't even add things into the budget or present our language. We just have to present suggestions, and it's up to the governor to decide what he's going to put in the final thing based on our suggestions. So
even though there's an emergency happening right now, and even though this was already decided, there's no way of reconsidering and just offering another budget?
I mean, right now there kind of is, because within this budget, there was a line in the legislation that says the governor can go back and reallocate some of the funding. So say, like, now budget's passed, Medicaid is cut, but the federal government, we're literally waiting every day to see if they can provide us with an extra relief, bundle of money, a couple of extra billion. He can then add that back into the Medicaid funding. So the governor has power right now to to play with, I guess, the budgets during the money during this time. And we've made an ask. I know the Assembly and the Senate and the governor has put a letter out to our congressional members to fight for us. Please get us more money. The state is really in a dire situation. And if and when we get that, then the governor can decipher it. So there is a chance that we can, replenish what we lost. But in that time that the budget was to be voted on, there was no way of knowing for sure. So my vote stood no, because I really felt that that would be more detrimental than anything else in the budget to more people, to take away funding to our hospitals that are inundated right now with patients, with doctors that are sick, that nurses that, are being spread thin. And morally in my heart, I just couldn't do it, and that's the toughest part. I think now, being an elected from being a staffer, is you really have to make, these tough decisions, and understand what it's going to do. And, while there's times that you're like, I get it, we want to do this, but the reality is it can't happen. Sometimes you just have to stick with, your principles and your morals. Like, I understand there's no money, but I cannot vote okay on this. Like, I cannot just be okay with it. So, unfortunately.
I'm just taking in the way you're presenting it, because you're becoming emotional too, and I can only imagine. Yes, because here's the thing: when we listen to the elected officials, everybody's referencing things in numbers, and you're humanizing it and helping us understand exactly what's happening on that floor, right? Because you're dealing with numbers, but yet those numbers represent people.
Yeah, and that's where my emotions really did come out. Like, that was a tough budget, because not only was it, hard policy positions and things to vote on, but the way we were voting, it had like my anxiety up. So, a few members were positive for COVID-19, 3 Democratic members and a Republican member. So, there was danger and concern about having the whole conference and the assembly in chambers, 150 members plus the staff in there. There could be 200 people in that room. So we limited it to having 30 people in the room. So with the essential staff that is there, helping, I guess, with the count of the votes and all that, and the speaker and the majority leader leading the debates and everything. If members wanted to debate, you had to make a note beforehand and come to the floor with permission, knowing that only 10 other members were there, and you do your debate. And then when the vote was called, because the speaker, if you ever see it, the speaker's like, read the last section, and then they count the votes. So I'm in my office looking on my computer on the live stream. And as soon as he says that, if I want to vote no, I got to run down to chambers to make sure I vote no. And if we wanted to vote yes, we did a rules change that we're able to count the yeses, by those that don't come down to chamber. So it was kind of like, a psychological thing, because you're like, okay, I need to vote no. What are the consequences of voting no? Because there's so many other things in this bill. Like, that bill that I voted no on had a whole package about banning tobacco advertisements and e-flavored cigarettes, which I was all about. I was, happy to support that. I even had one of my original bills was made it into the budget that I'm happy about, but I had to vote no because of the bigger issue with Medicaid and education and bail reform that just sit heavy on me. So watching the assembly on the screen, and then hearing no, and running down, making sure that I don't miss, the final call to then, have my vote be yes or no. So, it was kind of like nerve wracking, because then it was like 2 days that we were doing this, and we had maybe like 4 hours, 5 hours to sleep before coming back into doing video conference, and then, back into session. And between you and me, secret, not really secret, but I fell asleep in my chair for a second. So I remember waking up oh my God, what time is it? I missed the vote. No, it's supposed to vote no on this. And I'm checking, and the TV screen doesn't even show what is the bill number that's being discussed. Because one of the bills, the debate was like 6 hours, because members were walking down and coming back up, and we had to wait for the turns, and it was tiring. And same time, you couldn't look away, because God forbid you miss something, you missed the chance to vote and how you wanted to vote. So, all right. It was tough.
Yeah, it sounds like it was tough. It sounds like you lost a lot of sleep over that. And you're a perfect example as to why we need more women in office. So thank you for sharing those details.
No, you're welcome. And one thing that I don't know, with women, I see it more in my colleagues too. We're very detail oriented. Right. So reading through that bill line by line, and the bills aren't just plain English. It's spoken like a lawyer, I guess you want to say. Right. So the notes that I took literally look like this, with what's good, what's bad, this. and pros and cons, and like really weighing it out and trying to figure out like what's the effect on the greater public, and what would really be helpful to more people. So it's a lot of little work. It keeps your mind buzzing.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And I can only imagine because there's a lot of lives and a lot of livelihood relying on these bills. So I want to thank you for taking the time to share it with our viewers. Are there any last words you want to share before we go?
Well, right now, stay positive. I know this is a tough time, mentally, physically, emotionally for a lot of people. And, please try to stay positive for yourself and for your neighbors. Check on your neighbors. If there's seniors, around your building or your neighborhood, if you can, give them a call. Please keep in touch with, the elected officials, the mayor's office, the governor's office, because information is constantly being put out. That's half of my work while I'm in quarantine here, just following up with the updates and making sure that I'm able to relay it out to my public. And, keep the spirits up.
Thank you.
It's going to be a rough week, maybe next week as well, but we will get through this. And if we listen to the rules, stay home, social distance, then we can get out of this quicker.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Nathalia Fernandez, Assembly Member, 80th District. You guys, for more updates from Assemblywoman Nathalia Fernandez and her office, you can follow her on Instagram and Twitter at Fernandez4NY.
Yes. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nathalia. Stay safe.
Who's most at risk for coronavirus? People over 65, people with underlying medical conditions like heart disease, chronic lung disease, asthma, diabetes, people undergoing cancer treatment, and people with weakened immune systems. What should you do if you or a loved one is at higher risk? Avoid close contact with people, avoid crowds, stay home if you can, wash your hands frequently. Learn more ways to protect yourself and others at coronavirus.gov.
It's a very difficult disease to treat. I work in the emergency department as a physician. A lot of the critical care physicians are working 24 hours and more, just incredibly long hours. And people, when they aren't here, are also working on communicating and discussing what the best ways to take care of the patients who have this illness are. At the beginning, we saw a lot of people who were having flu-like symptoms. Pretty quickly from there, we saw people who were starting to deteriorate rapidly, and they were going from basically just having a flu-like illness to needing oxygen, to needing a ventilator, and in a lot of cases dying. The biggest thing is to avoid getting the disease and to avoid passing it along. And the two things that I would say are, one, I think all the social distancing stuff is really, really important. And the other is, I think that a lot of people might have gotten the impression that this is really a disease for old people. And that's just not our experience at all. We have lots of young people who are very sick and in a lot of cases dying from the disease despite incredible resuscitative efforts.
COVID-19 is overwhelming our hospital systems. Governor Cuomo said it best. It doesn't just start a fire and stop when you put that fire out. It consumes another place and consumes another place. So it just keeps spreading until we flatten that curve.
Social distancing, how are you? Virtual hug. Virtual hug.
I'm Lorraine Cashin. I am the program director of the graduate program in physician assistant studies at Mercy College. It is a global crisis. And the physician assistants, many of our graduates are on the front line. They're doing extraordinary work. My first job was in the emergency room at Elmhurst Hospital. Elmhurst Hospital Center is a constantly busy emergency department. And right now it is really considered ground zero of the epicenter.
This is the front lines for sure. This is where the largest percentage of coronavirus patients, at least in the United States right now, is.
They're running out of personal protective equipment. They are pleading for all different types of equipment. So our medical director, Dr. David Cherkis, medical director here for Mercy College, also works on the front lines as one of the emergency room doctors at Elmhurst. And he has worked probably at this point in time 16 shifts in a row.
The Bronx community around Mercy College and the community here in Queens have a lot in common. A lot of hardworking immigrants, blue collar, people who often don't have enough access to health care in general. And so when something like this happens, the already stretched system that they're counting on just can't flex anymore.
We're bringing all of the equipment that we have here at Mercy College on the Bronx campus. We're bringing everything we have, our masks, our gowns, our gloves. We're gonna drive from the Bronx, which is where we are right now. We've picked up the equipment, we've loaded our cars. We're going to drive down to Elmhurst Hospital, and we're going to meet Dr. Cherkes in the ambulance bay before he goes into the hospital.
David.
Oh, you're here, Doc. Good. Good. Excellent. What we're going to do is we'll load everything on the stretcher for you. You're going to get it in?
That's great. I have a pretty good draft guideline on how to care for adults. I'll send it to you. One of the major issues is personal protective equipment for the staff. These are in pretty short supply. Gowns, gloves, also in short supply. And so in order to keep the staff safe while we're caring for these patients, we've been fortunate enough to get incredible donations, in this case from Mercy College. I'm going to get to work.
We love the Bronx, and I know that we're Bronx strong. This is global, national, and as a Mercy community, we continue to put ourselves on the front line and continue to do whatever we can to try to help flatten this curve.
Welcome back to our remote version of Open. So the COVID-19 pandemic has left many people around the world forced to adjust to life indoors. It's affected people mentally and physically. And our next guest is an Ayurvedic practitioner and yoga therapist. And she's here to share some tools to assist with easing mind, body, and soul through Ayurveda and yoga therapy. Please welcome Corey Touche. Hi, Corey.
Hi, Rhina. Very nice to be with you guys. Thank you for having me.
What I didn't share with everyone is that you're coming in via Hawaii.
Yeah, I'm way over here.
You're in Oahu?
I'm on the north shore of Oahu in a little town called Wailua.
Well,
you might hear some chickens in the background.
Interesting. And so I do want to share with everyone that you do have a practice in the Bronx, and which is why we even reached out to you. However, you happen to be in Hawaii right now, which is the beauty of technology, is that we can still remain in touch. And one of the things about Hawaii, though, is I noticed that Hawaii has really low numbers with this outbreak.
Yeah, well, we're a remote island, and being that way, they started to shut down travelers coming in pretty quickly. And most of the island is not very dense, except for the city of Honolulu, which has, the highest numbers of all the Hawaiian islands. But I think part of it is that, before the sort of lockdown, the culture in general is a lot of outdoor activity, and not being in like close confined spaces too much.
And so you're all under the same self-quarantine rule and order.
Yes, we are on the same rules, self-quarantine. We've been quarantined, I think we're at like day 21 now. And the beaches started to close about a week ago, but that's taken a little bit longer for people to take a little bit more seriously. They did mention on the news yesterday that they're going to start really cracking down on, people breaking the stay-at-home rules.
Oh my goodness, that must be rough though. I mean, to be in a beautiful hot island and not be able to go outside. And so while under self-quarantine, let's talk a little bit about Ayurveda, right?
Yeah.
Ayurveda, okay. So first of all, how does one even decide to get into Ayurveda and yoga therapy? Like the name itself isn't as common as the other, Hatha yoga. Why Ayurveda?
So Ayurveda is two words, Ayur, which means life, and Veda, which means science. And Ayurveda and yoga all come from the Vedas, which are these really old texts that we have that came from India. And they're about 5,000 years old. That's when the first things were started to be written down. But it's believed that these sciences were taught orally for thousands of years prior to that. So it's really ancient wisdom. And even though it's rooted in India, it's really common for all of us. It's a living science. So it's not confined to any culture or geography.
So when we reference this wisdom is based on the relationship to mind, body, and soul. It's Eastern medicine, right? And so based on our current situation, how does one apply this to themselves?
So Ayurveda, there's so many ways. I'm trying not to get tongue twisted, but its magic is in prevention, and so it gives us rules or guidelines of how to get our daily rhythms, our activities more in line with nature. So our circadian rhythm is definitely connected to the rhythms of the sun and the moon and the seasons, and it helps us to recognize what those are and then live more according to them. And it's based on individuals. So if two individuals came in and they both had the COVID case, there are definitely things that we would do across the board to help treat that. But there also would be differences from individual to individual. And that's another sort of magic point of Ayurveda, is that we're really looking at each person as an individual, like microcosm, rather than treating blank symptoms.
So right now, based on all of us being self-isolated and limited to a lot of things, it is specifically movement. And while we're not going to necessarily exercise yoga or present yoga at this particular moment, like in full-fledged, right, on the floor,
right,
what could somebody do to help them not only with their physical ailments and or just even their mind, like just us sitting here, like what parts of the thing about Eastern medicine is that, you know, I know there's acupuncture that is also applied, and so if one is taking care of themselves, how do they go about even learning what is?
Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to start a little bit broader, and then we'll come back to some real specifics. So in Ayurveda, we have a concept called dinacharya, and that's the daily routine. And so that's just guiding somebody to make sure that they're waking up at the same times every day, that the first thing that you do when you wake up is to drink a glass of water. That helps to flush the system. Things like tongue scraping instead of brushing your tongue will help to remove toxins and pull toxins out. Gargling every day with turmeric, salt water. And even if you're going out in public, if you have to go to the grocery store, gargling with salt water when you come home, making sure that your meals are at the same time every day. And then sort of the magic point of Ayurveda is this practice called Abhyanga. And it's a self-oil massage. And the idea is that you warm up some oil, and you would do this before you get in the shower, and that you apply oil all over the body. And this, I mean, it's so many layers of why this is powerful. One is that you're actually touching yourself, which many of us don't do, and you get familiar with your own landscape. And that you also are moving the lymph. So it's a form of exercise, even though you get to be still. I encourage everybody to try and just recognize actually how much strength it takes to give yourself a massage, and how much flexibility you need to be able to, reach over onto your back or reach down to the flanks. And so there's many layers. And through that practice, we activate these points on the body called marma points, which are where acupuncture points originated from. And they're energetic points. And by pressing them, it's like if you had a hose and water was flowing through the hose and there was a kink somewhere. And by pressing on the kink, it releases that stagnation. So now the energy can flow more directly. And that's really what both yoga and Ayurveda are trying to do, is to reduce or eliminate any restriction or impediments in the flow of energy in the body, so that the body's own intelligence is what's able to flow.
So give me an example.
Yeah. So on your hand, right in the center, if you make a fist where your middle finger meets, this point is called Tala Madhya, and it's a heart point. So it's connected directly to your heart. And one of the things I ask people is like, what's the first thing you do when you have pain somewhere in the body? And most people are like, I have a headache, or, oh, I hurt my shoulder, or, oh, my tummy hurts. And so that's your own body's wisdom, your own intelligence, your own intuition, directing yourself to heal yourself. So you immediately touch the area, connecting that heart energy, which is the healing energy, to the part of your body that needs it. And so you're waking up your body's own intelligence.
That's already there. That already exists.
It's already there. Yeah.
It's just a matter of becoming aware of that connection to yourself.
Yes.
So where can people learn more about this?
So where I learned was with Dr. Vasant Lad. He is the gentleman that brought Ayurveda from India to the West in the early 80s. He has a school in New Mexico called the Ayurvedic Institute. But there are schools popping up all over. In fact, we started a school in New York City at Integral Yoga down on 13th Street. We have a school there that takes people through a 600-hour Ayurveda health counselor program. So basically students learn how to work with clients through diet and lifestyle alone, using, simple herbs and spices and really working with different lifestyle activities.
Beautiful. And I know you also started, before we go, Ayurveda for the People.
Ayurveda for the People. We have a clinic that's in the Bronx at the Andrew Friedman House, which is at, I think it's 1125 Grand Concourse. And this is both a clinic and a teaching clinic. So we have a clinic there. People can come in, they get their pulse read, they get a whole, health assessment done, and then they walk away with herbal protocols, yoga protocols, lifestyle protocols. And on top of that, we have students coming in who are trying to gain clinical hours in Ayurvedic medicine, helping us to work on, different aspects. They see clients as well, and they just start to gain that clinical time.
All right. So we're out of time, but before we go, really quickly, what can people do for this time that we're forced to deal with ourselves? Really?
Yeah. So I really want to just remind people that oftentimes when we have something going on with us, people say that's all in your head or that's all in your mind. And I want to encourage you to recognize the power of your mind and to take this healthcare into your own hands, that you can totally be responsible for yourself, and just each day taking some time to sit quietly, to touch yourself, to apply that oil to yourself, to do some deep breathing exercises. And then with regard to the COVID specifically, using your kitchen is your pharmacy. So many of us have cardamom, coriander, and ginger right in the cabinet, and making a tea of that and drinking that every day will just help to boost your immune system, keep the systems clear and running smoothly.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Be proactive. Be proactive.
Yes,
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Thank you for the advice, Corey, and thank
you for having
the time. I know you had to get up earlier in order to be on this call with us, so thank you for that.
I'm always up early. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Once again, you guys, for more on Corey Touche, you can follow her on Instagram at Ayurveda_for_the_people. Yeah. Thank you. We are going to take a quick break, but when we return, we'll hear how one organization is, it's actually a person who's helping people get creative. Don't go anywhere. And welcome back to Open Remote. Our next guest is a visual artist from the Bronx, primarily known for her Bronx face projects. And today she's joining us to tell us how she is staying creative during self-isolation, while also offering art classes for children throughout New York City. Please welcome visual artist Antoinette Annie Legnini. Hey, Annie.
Hi, Rhina. How are you?
I'm good. Should I be referring to you as Antoinette now?
Yeah, you call me Annie.
How are you holding up during these times?
I mean, just like we all are, just getting through it day by day. That's honestly how I've been trying to see it, just one day at a time. And it's rough, but I mean, it's rough for all of us.
So I noticed you have some images from your Bronx face projects behind you. How many of those do you have within your residence?
Right now, I only have a couple of them completed. Because I have a few of them on display, like at Fordham Plaza, and then they were on other shows that unfortunately had to be canceled, but obviously due to the situation. So right now I only have a couple completed, and I have a bunch of work in progress at my home studio. So they're growing. I'm building them back up here.
It's lovely. It looks like you have people in your home. And so how do they serve in keeping you company?
Yeah, I'm gonna start posting them up in the seats around me and talking to them.
Yeah, no, it's like that movie where he's talking to the ball. What do you call the ball? Wilson? What was the name of that movie with Tom Hanks?
Oh, Castaway.
Yeah, Castaway.
I'm this close to that, you know?
You're that close to that?
Yeah.
But at least you have real faces.
Yeah, that's something.
And let's talk a little bit about those faces and how you pick your subjects.
Yeah, so they're part of this series called Bronx Faces that I've been working on for the last almost 4 years now. In August, it'll be 4 years. So it is a collaborative community art project that pairs the stories and experiences of Bronx natives with a mixed media portrait. So they kind of...
How many of them do you have so far?
I have, oh my goodness, I'm just losing track. I think I have 53 completed out of 100 with like maybe 10 in progress at the moment. So it's a lot.
It is a lot.
Yeah, just a couple with me like in my home at the moment.
And the other ones are where?
Yeah, I think 48 of them are at Fordham Plaza right now, which is actually a public display. So you could actually walk by if you want.
Right, because it's on a glass window, right? You can
see
it as you walk by.
Exactly. It's visible from the street, which is kind of nice. Like if you want to like go for like, your daily walk or something, get some fresh air, you can stop by it. Although I want everyone to stay inside, Yeah,
well, also on your website, you can also visit your artwork because you have a lovely, lovely gallery. And what I really appreciate about this project is that you provide history behind it. You're giving insight on each individual, on the subjects. And so that's why I'm curious to know how you pick your subjects.
Yeah, well, that was exactly like my reasoning for wanting to do this project, is because I wanted to learn more about my Bronx home from my community, from my neighbors, from the folks who have grown up here. So I wanted to hear the history of the Bronx through their context, through their voice, So this was a project for me to learn more about my home. So I had people about 4 years ago almost submit to an open call online that started with just a couple of my friends, and I asked them what their favorite food spot was around the Bronx, because I feel like that's a good way to get to know an area. And then I asked them a couple more questions, like what stands out the most growing up in the Bronx, which may not always be a happy story or positive memory, but we're going to add context to that memory, What did you do for fun growing up in the Bronx? What's your favorite local spot, whatever it is. And then I pair that with their portrait, just to give me more of an idea of what is your experience growing up in the Bronx, And every piece is titled with their name, neighborhood that they grew up with, and the year that they were born. Again, just more context to their answer.
Yes, yeah, it's definitely a nice way to just provide some insight as to the Bronx now. And the other part of it is the dynamics that you use in your mixed media, right? There's glitter, there's all these other elements that are added to each of these portraits. So I know on the website, we're just looking at it as images, but in real life, is there texture to all of that?
Oh yeah, they're super textured. When I'm around, at least, not when it's on display, but like I'll encourage people, like, hey, you could touch it if you want, only from there, please, because I just get nervous. But I want to encourage this, like they're because they really come to life. Like it's so wild to see like this painted realism and then this contrast in like real materials. Like it tricks your eye. It's like, wow, what is real that I'm looking at right now? And it kind of bugs you out of it. One of my favorite pieces that I just made recently in the past month or two is my participant LA. He's got tattoos and he's got the braid. Yeah, so he's response.
Got tattoos on his face.
Yeah, those are really fun to paint too.
I can imagine.
Yeah, his response, a lot of the times, most of the time, the participants' words, their reflection has an influence on the materials that I use. And in his, he was talking about how his favorite local spot is his mom's house, and there's always a fresh pot of coffee whenever he's home. So in his portrait, I used coffee beans, and that's like
I
a little.
saw that as braids.
Yeah,
I saw
yeah.
that. I saw that.
He gave me that idea, you know. It's
That was
like
dope. That was dope.
yeah, thank you. I love that. That was really fun. I was like, oh
Yeah.
my God, I can do that. You know?
Yeah, no, I please, honey, I praise brilliance. I'm like, brilliant. Yes. So, but wait, you know, we're just going on and on and on, and we could talk about the Bronx Face Project all we want. However, we have to make sure that we mention these classes that you're offering to the next generation before we go.
Yeah. Thank you for providing this platform for it too. So I'm a teaching artist with Spark. We are an art, yoga, and meditation program for kids all across New York City. And, you know, we have all been affected by the current crisis with schools closing, because we teach mostly after school, and we teach in some electives in some middle schools and Saturday classes. So we've been seriously impacted. We have to completely shift gears and just figure out how can we still bring our art lessons, our art classes, that spark of creativity to our students, you know, and maybe not only our students, but can we reach others through this right now, you know, during this time of isolation. So
how are you coordinating this, right? So the kids are working through Google Meets and Google Class. And so obviously you would be more of an after school program. Is this a Zoom application? Like how does one become involved? Like, do they have to register? Do they receive a Zoom conference? What's that process?
Yeah, sure. So right now you can go to the Spark website. It's thespark.nyc, and you can see our schedule of classes. We have, like, you could just scroll down and you can see our schedule. You can see which artist is teaching on at what day, at what time. And you can schedule just like one drop-in class. We're on Kid Pass, if you've ever heard of that, or you can
What
just.
What are the age ranges?
So I typically teach ages like 4 to 7 and then 8 to 10. If you have a kid who's like outside of that age range, hit us up, you know, like we're not gonna keep this from anyone, but that's typically our age group. And you can drop in on a class, you can register right on the website. We accept Venmo, Zelle, PayPal. And again, if that's something that, you know, you don't have that, hit us up, like we're willing to work with you. Right now we have a special discount for Bronx families for group classes, which you can see on the website as well. We have not been able to teach yet in the Bronx, so I think that that would be really special to offer that to families here.
Yeah, no, I feel you. It's all about getting creative, right? We got to create our space. We got to create the feeling. We got to keep creating. When most importantly, we got to document this time, because this is a very historical time.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a really rough time for everyone. Like, everyone's hurting right now and struggling. But one thing I know that, like, the teaching artists at Spark right now, what we're all kind of feeling is like our role right now is to, you know, bring this spark, this creative kind of inspiration, like, to families, to kids. So, like, let's keep that going. And right now we'll have a free lesson up very soon, within like the next couple of days. We'll have a free lesson up on our website, so you could just go do that lesson with your kids, do it with your family, and it's one you can do over and over again. So that's one thing that is a free YouTube video that we're gonna just give to you guys, just to start off with, you know.
Awesome, thank you. All right, Antoinette, here's to bringing Spark into the children's lives. Good for you.
Yeah,
and you guys, to get some art lessons from Antoinette and Legnini, you can visit thespark.nyc, and you can also find her on Instagram at legnini.art. Don't go anywhere. Bobby C's weekly sports roundup is coming up next.
With coronavirus spreading, people at higher risk must take extra precautions. You're at higher risk if you're over 65 or if you have an underlying medical condition. Please visit coronavirus.gov for more information.
Good morning, Bobby C. here. Sports fans have long enjoyed video games of their favorite leagues featuring star players. Our sports roundup this morning takes us into a new world of sports where those same athletes you grew up idolizing and playing on video game systems are now actually playing video games too. We've seen plenty of that in motor racing of late, where sim racing is allowing race leagues near and far to put on races for fans starved for sports. Supercars champion Scott McLaughlin has arrived on the American motor racing scene. You could say the New Zealand racer taught the IndyCar drivers a virtual lesson. He takes the IndyCar iRacing Challenge event at Barber Motorsports Park in Alabama, winning his maiden voyage in the series, albeit virtually. McLaughlin was slated to drive for Team Penske at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in May, but the ongoing coronavirus pandemic has caused the postponement of all major racing events, including the Indy 500. This caused the action to head into the virtual world, with drivers from the IndyCar series, including Australian Will Power and defending champion Joseph Newgarden, along with NASCAR legend and 7-time Cup Series champion Jimmy Johnson, battling it out on the online racing simulator iRacing. The 2-time champion McLaughlin won Saturday. Power finished second. We caught up with Power, an IndyCar living legend, and asked him about the staying power of sim racing.
Next up, we're going to go to Bobby from BronxNet TV in New York City. Thanks for joining us, Bobby. You are open for business.
Thank you, Kate. This question is for Will. Will, it definitely seems that a new age of competitive virtual racing has arrived. Can you see these esport races continuing when things finally do normalize?
I do. You see it in other forms of gaming. So I think that what's really good for us as a sport is that it is pretty close to the real thing. If you're watching on TV, the graphics have got so good, you got to take a second look to say, well, is that real or not? So that's what's kind of lucky for us in this time. And maybe it's something that can happen in the off seasons. I'm sure the drivers aren't going to want to spend the time that you have to spend to prepare for these races. But I think it's great. I think people will start getting paid to do it like they do in other games, and it'll become pretty big. But I think people will be specialized. I don't think you'll see real life drivers, transitioning to sim racing. I just think that you'll see sim racers actually get paid and get a bit more recognition.
I know some of the drivers had actually said that they get more nervous sim racing than they do actually racing because of how peaceful it is. What is the difference for you?
It's not. It's the same. So a little bit more nervous. I mean, it's probably more nervous before. The bigger the event, the more nerves you have. I mean, sometimes I get in the real car, I have zero nerves at all. It just depends on the day and mindset.
IndyCar has a 6-event virtual series through May 2nd, 2 down, 4 to go. As for the actual race schedule, the NTT IndyCar Series is shaking it up again after news that the Detroit Grand Prix has been canceled this year due to the crisis. The suspended season had been set to kick off in the Motor City on May 30th, but will now begin at the Texas Motor Speedway on June 6th if there are no further disruptions. To make up for some of the events missed so far, the series will now hold doubleheader weekends in Iowa in July and at Laguna Seca in Monterey, California in September. A second road race has been added at the IMS on October 3rd, with the first scheduled for Saturday, July 4th, ahead of the NASCAR race on Indy's Oval on July 5th. In the meantime, virtual racing will have to do. It's actually been pretty good. Ferrari's new frontman, Charles Leclerc, took his first victory of the year in quote-unquote Australia, while NASCAR driver Bubba Wallace was dropped by an actual sponsor for his online theatrics. And when you think about it, IndyCar had plenty of drama too, as a non-series driver figured out how to use the expertise of a real-life Penske engineer to get an edge at a virtual Barber Motorsports Park. Leclerc took the checkered flag at the F1 Esports Virtual GP at the Australian Grand Prix Albert Park track in Melbourne Sunday after claiming he spent up to 5 hours a day preparing for the event. After the win, Leclerc noted that he was very nervous during the event, but said that he and other drivers found the race very, very fun, and noted that they would continue to put on more races to entertain the fans during the ongoing pandemic. Meanwhile, Wallace dipped mid-race on Sunday during a virtual race broadcasted nationally on Fox Sports. In the process, his sponsor is dipping out too. William Byron led the most laps in NASCAR's first 2 virtual races, but had nothing to show for his gaming skills. The third time out, he got the win. Byron easily won the iRacing event Sunday at virtual Bristol Motor Speedway, where NASCAR would have been racing had the coronavirus pandemic not caused sports to shut down. Even motorcycle racing has gone virtual. Honda's MotoGP rookie Alex Marquez is king of the pixels in the inaugural virtual Grand Prix on the Mugello circuit after a dramatic crash-filled race sees the Spaniard cruise to victory. Like the rest of motorsport, MotoGP pushed its season further into the summer. It's slated to return in June, with the recent postponements of Italy and Spain. Meanwhile, if you're keeping count, F1 is down the first 9 races of the calendar. The Canadian Grand Prix is the latest casualty. Although President Trump has expressed optimism that sports leagues could resume play sooner than later, sports leaders have been planning for a longer postponement of games and events extending into the fall and possibly later. After meeting with the commissioners of several major sports leagues on Saturday, Trump discussed resuming sports in August, though the president later told reporters at the White House, "I can't tell you a date, but I think it's going to be sooner rather than later." Still, a range of sports leaders and public officials have cast doubt on normalcy returning anytime soon, and even fall events face uncertainty over concerns that a renewal of mass gatherings could undermine any gains made in the fight against the pandemic by then. MLB and the NBA have discussed returning sooner with no fans and perhaps all the teams in one central location under confinement. For now, it's virtual racing and other esports, like the NBA staging some 2K, WrestleMania going down with no fans, and UFC fights here and there when Dana White can find locations to stage them in front of no fans. Needless to say, interesting times we are experiencing. Stay home, stay safe. Let's get the real thing back. Let's get real life back. That's your sports. I'm Bobby C.
Welcome back to Open Remote. Songwriters Sunday is an open mic event that's going to showcase artists throughout New York City in an effort to support the community during our current times. The COVID-19 crisis has left us all in a state of survival, leaving those already in need in dire straits. The Songwriters Sunday's donations are going to go to the People's Food Program to assist with providing food and supplies to Bronx residents. And joining us to share more, we welcome Songwriters Sunday founder, I am Chelsea I Am, along with co-founder of Black Lives Matter Greater New York and New York candidate for the 15th Congressional District, Shavonna Newsom. Hello, ladies.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And so let's talk a little bit about the conditions of the Bronx in this present state and why you've chosen to dedicate yourself and your talents to this movement.
Sure. I know for myself, Songwriters Sunday, we've been around for about 5 years. It'll be 5 years in November. But the last year we've been in the Bronx at a location called I-9 Bistro on Bruckner Avenue. And for me personally, if I'm in a space where I'm not only sharing my talents, I'm also sharing that space with the community. And that community supports us. So I want to be able to support them as well in any way possible. And I saw that this movement was happening through a friend of mine. His name is Descendant. He's very involved in it already. And in trying to figure out what I could do to support the community. Thank goodness I was linked to Miss Newsom and this organization.
Yeah, let's talk about your connection to Miss Newsom, to Shavonna Newsom, who is one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter Greater New York, and how this connection happened.
Well,
Yes.
Descendant is, oh, sorry.
No, go
ahead. Actually, I was looking to speak to you, Shavonna.
Descendant has played an integral role in my campaign. He had done a music set for one of my fundraisers, and he's been canvassing and on the ground. He's calling around, helping with peers, so he paired us together.
Got it. And I also know that you come from a background of social justice, and so aside from running for Congress, this has been your movement anyway. This is what you're about.
This is who I am. It's an organizer and an activist, and I hate to keep jumping back into the race, but that's how we realized the needs. We were doing wellness checks on my future constituents, and we asked them if they needed anything, and they didn't have food. So what we did was we put up on the website a bunch of resources, and we paired with our local food banks. And we've been going out and doing deliveries, because a little bit about the Bronx and my neighborhood where I live, we are the poorest congressional district in the nation. So with or without COVID-19, people are struggling to eat.
To begin with, right. And Chelsea, can I ask you, how has this been for you transferring everything from a physical form into a virtual form?
It's been very interesting and fulfilling at the same time. I mean, of course, we're all dealing with the difficulties. I hosted on Instagram Live, and people have to request to be a part of the video. So I share my screen, and then again, they'll start to share their talents. I think the positive of that is, whereas we were only located in the Bronx before, we're now technically located worldwide.
That's interesting. That's an interesting concept right there, right? And so you're saying that the way you're setting this up is so that people come and then they join in it, because it's an open mic. So walk us through it a little bit, because the idea is that this is a fundraiser, and it's obviously for this certain section of the Bronx, and you're going to be funding the People's Food Program. But the idea is also to bring new people together, and I'm interested in knowing how you're going to be able to even keep track of like who's next and how that lineup is going to even flow.
So to be honest, we've only done it one time before online. The way that we did it before is that there's a way that you can pin a comment. So the way I would proceed is I would pin a comment for the Cash App and the Venmo information. And then I was telling people, drop a heart if you'd like to perform. And in my own like area, I would be making note of who said they wanted to perform. And then I would say, okay, up next we have this person, and on deck, like, make sure you're ready. Rhina, make sure you're ready to perform, right?
Is that an invitation?
and then I would request that they join the live and they perform a song or two, and we keep going. In this instance, I've also been telling everyone that I will be matching funds up to $100 personally, just to make sure that people are really driving in and making those donations.
That's wonderful. Bless you. Bless you. Shavonna, you know, there's a lot of people running for this particular congressional district. And I know, as we already discussed, this is part of your background. This is part of your upbringing. How do you feel the response has been to this district based on our current circumstances with the COVID-19?
A lot of people are losing relatives, like across the street from me. And if you look at the maps that the city are putting out, the district is the primary hot zone of who's being affected. Black people and people of color and poor people are disproportionately being affected by this. So last night, we released a letter on our social media platforms and a petition to the governor, Governor Cuomo, asking if they release the numbers. So not only were my future constituents and my neighbors and friends in a food desert, right now, Black people in New York City are dying at an alarming rate, and the federal government and the state and local government does not want to release those numbers. So it's pretty sad. All the pre-existing issues that people had from being poor and being Black, it's having an adverse and terrible effect with fighting the COVID virus. Right here in the Bronx, we have something called Asthma Alley. As we know, people with asthma, they don't really heal well from COVID-19. They're sicker. They're the most vulnerable. So it's just the added on negative. But people like Chelsea who stepped up, who wants to organize this amazing event, our whole host of volunteers, movers and shakers, Black Lives Matter, Greater New York, everyone's come together for the People's Food Program, because we're not doctors, so we can't heal them, but at least we can help you with your food in terms of getting your medication, feeding you, and working with local food pantries. As of right now, we've already fed hundreds of people, and with Chelsea's awesome idea and this fun event that we're having on Sunday, hopefully we'll be able to feed hundreds more.
Awesome, Chelsea. So I'm really, I applaud you for making such strong efforts to not only unite everybody, but to be a stand for your community. The fact that you're matching this funding as well is really, that's impressive. So if anybody wanted to lock in, right, because this is going to be happening on Sunday, do they need to follow you, or they just can go to Instagram Live? How does that part of it work?
So you would follow me on Instagram. My Instagram name is I am Chelsea. I am Chelsea spelled like the neighborhood. And then it'll be like on Instagram, there's a ring that sort of like lights up. So my profile will light up at 7 o'clock, and we're going from 7 to 10.
7 to 10. So how many people do you anticipate giving space for? Or, that are going to be able to perform? Let's say they get on at 7, like, is there a sign up time, or are you just rolling it as it flows in?
I usually just do it as it flows in. I'm thinking, like, honestly, a typical night, we could do 20 to 25 people, depending on what's going on, unless nobody gets carried away with what they're doing. And I hate to cut people off, but sometimes I have to.
Right. And so, but because it's an open mic, are people just free flowing, or they're coming in with their lyrics, they're coming in with their musical instruments, or they're spoken word artists? Like what kind of mix is this?
It's majority, generally it's mostly spoken word and musicians and singers. In the past, we've had comedians, but any type, whatever your discipline is, it's welcome. It's welcome.
That's lovely. All right. That's funny. You're like, oh, we've had comedians. I didn't say anything about comedians, but it's okay. I got it. Okay, so Shavonna, before we go, because I know Chelsea's going to give us a little taste of what she's going to be bringing to the forefront. Do you have any last words?
We have a whole resource for COVID, for coronavirus on the website, local food banks that we're currently utilizing, mental health, because that's important. We've currently been on lockdown for about 20 days, where you can go and get tested. And you can find all these resources on ShavonnaNewsomForCongress.com, or we have it available on all social media platforms at New York Vonnie, that's VONNI. And thanks for having me. Keep fighting the good fight with me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for being a stand for our community. And don't go anywhere, you guys, because we're going to take a quick break. But I am Chelsea. She's going to perform for us. So don't go anywhere. Welcome back. It's now time for this week's Open Artist Spotlight. Here now to before Nice Guys Lie, please welcome I Am Chelsea, I Am.
Feel good, so I don't feel good no more. Good vibes to the good vibes with the flow. Stay up, complacency, not where I wanna be. Make a decision, cause I'm not with the guessing and wishing. Play my rules, move about my life. Deuces up, see you next lifetime. I can't handle casual when you make me feel so special. I thought that maybe one day you would come around. I found the urge to care, but I lost that round. You thought it was enough to give me bits and pieces. I call feelings, and I messed up, and that's all my fault. Cause nice guys lie, waste your time. Listen when I tell ya, only wanna fool ya. Nice guys try to say goodbye, but keep you in the cuts when they wanna. Hold up. Nice guys, here we go, la ya 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 ya, yeah. La ya 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 ya, yeah. La ya 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 ya, yeah. La ya 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 ya. Old enough to know what I want, but too young to have it. I'm looking for that real love, that R&B straight classic. You're looking for that temporary, few girls at a time. I know my worth, I ain't got no time. Boy, I've been careless with my heart. Boy, I've been reckless from the start. Thought I could handle it. But I'm so damaged. I thought that maybe one day you would come around. I found the urge to care, but I lost that round. You thought it was enough to give me bits and pieces. I call feelings, and I messed up, and that's all my fault. Cause nice guys lie, waste your time. Listen when I tell ya, only wanna fool ya. Nice guys try to say goodbye, but keep you in the cuts when they wanna. Hold up. Nice guys, here we go, la ya 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 ya, yeah. La ya 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 ya, yeah. La ya 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 ya, yeah. La ya 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 ya, I keep it low key. I was broken inside. I listened to your words, but you ignored mine. I didn't really care. I was so into you. I tried to fix what I could see had been abused, but I'm taking back my life. I'm taking back control. Everything I did, I let you play your role. You were never qualified, but I let you stick around. Said you wanna be Brandy, said you wanna be down, oh. They waste your time, oh. They only wanna fool you. Oh, yeah. Oh, cause nice guys, la ya 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 ya, la ya 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 ya, la ya 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 ya, la ya 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 ya. Thank you.
Have me snapping over here, sister. Thank you, Chelsea. Or I am Chelsea. I am. All right, you guys, Songwriters Sunday, the give back in support of the People's Food Program will take place on Sunday, April 12th from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. live on Instagram at I am Chelsea. I am. that is our show today, mi gente. Thanks to all our guests for coming through, and to you, our viewers, for tuning in. If you missed any part of the show, you can check out the recablecast tonight, 24 hours a day at BronxNet.tv. I'm Rhina Valentin, and from all of us here at Open, may the universe provide paz, prosperity, y amor. Stay blessed, healthy, and safe. Happy Easter, everyone. Adios.